So, you think your life is rough because the WIF's down? Try being a rat. Not just any rat. A ship rat, trapped aboard a creaking wooden coffin, barreling across disease-ridden oceans during the glorious age of sail, where the food was hard enough to break teeth, the water could kill you, and hygiene was a suggestion, not a practice. Welcome to your new afterlife. Soggy, smelly, and somehow ... historically important. This isn't just your history class in slow motion. This is your reincarnated nightmare, fur, fleas, cannons, and all. Let's tuck you in with some truly dreadful facts. Sweet dreams, still here. Then swab the like button and sail the seas of subscription. Or don't, it's not like you'll get scurvy. Probably, either way. This boat's leaving port, so ... congratulations, you're dead. But not just dead, reincarnated, reborn, spiritually recycled, and not into anything majestic like a hawk, or even moderately functional like a pigeon. No, the wheel of cosmic fortune has spat you out as Rattus norvegicus, a common ship rat, the pestilential pest, the scurrying shadow of maritime misery, a living flea hotel with a taste for old bread, wet rope, and existential dread. You wake up under a mouldy burlap sack in the belly of a creaking 18th century sailing ship. It's damp. It smells like salt, sweat, and things that used to be alive. Congratulations again. Your lungs now belong to something that will die of bronchitis if it breathes in too hard. There's a dull thump above, footsteps, probably the ship's cook, stomping toward the food stores, your food stores. Technically, see as a rat, you don't own anything, but you inhabit everything. Grain sacks, water barrels, a warm boot that once contained a foot and still smells like its ghost. It's all fair game. That's the first perk of rat life. Squatter's rights, aggressively applied. You slither through the beams like you were built for this, because you were, literally. Let's break down your body for a moment. You've got soft bones, not play me a sad song soft, I mean physically pliable. You can squeeze through a hole the size of a coin. No one knows how, not even you. It's the rat equivalent of parkour, but wetter and more likely to result in death by mopped up your tail. Horrifying, but also crucial. It's your balance beam, your radar, your third leg in a three-legged race you didn't ask to enter. And those teeth, constantly growing, like forever. You have to chew wood and rope just to keep them filed down, which means you have to nibble your surroundings constantly, not out of malice, just maintenance. You're basically a living chainsaw with commitment issues. Let's talk instincts. You've got the paranoia of a tax evader and the survival skills of a doomsday prepper. You can detect poison with your nose, avoid traps with learned generational trauma, and spot an ambush before the human laying it even finishes thinking, what if I used cheese? You're fast, twitchy, deeply suspicious, and always hungry. Honestly, you'd make a great Wall Street trader, but despite all your razor-sharp rat features, let's not pretend you're top of the food chain. On this ship, that dubious honor belongs to humans, bipedal disasters in tricorn hats, armed with cutlasses and zero understanding of hygiene. To them, you're a problem, but also, secretly, a companion. You eat their crumbs. They tolerate your presence unless you chew through a rope and drop the anchor by accident. True story, we'll get to it. What's odd, though, is just how similar you and the humans are. You both scavenge, you both huddle for warmth, and you both occasionally fight each other for a stale biscuit. The sailors are just slightly taller. Rats with worse teeth and a taste for rum that could strip paint. You live among them, under them, above them. Sometimes rats had free roam of the rigging at night, skittering along ropes like demonic spaghetti. And no, you don't get seasick. Your stomach has evolved past the point of caring. You could eat rotting leather and a side of toenail and be just fine. And probably will before the week is out. Still, there are worse fates. You're on a voyage, a real one, the kind historians write books about. You're traveling across oceans, to the Americas, to the West Indies, to far-off ports full of plague and promise. You're technically a world traveler. You just don't have a passport, or rights, or dignity. But hey, neither did most of the crew. You've got company, of course. Whole families of rats share your new floating slum. You know them, the jittery. One with the missing ear. His name's probably something like Scab, that massive alpha rat who always gets to the biscuit barrel first. Let's call her Maud. She's terrifying. She's had children, possibly yours. Don't overthink it. And this colony isn't just surviving. It's thriving. The ship is practically designed for you. Cracks in the floorboards, loose grain, water barrels for hydration. It's like Rat Versailles. If Versailles were made entirely of mildew and broken dreams. Here's a fun fact to chew on while you chew through. Someone's bootlace, rats. Like you have been part of ship life for centuries. Roman galleys had rats. Viking longships, rats. 15th century Spanish caravels, rats. You are a constant, a furry, twitching footnote in every age of exploration. While sailors changed flags, and gods and weapons, you stayed the same. Same tail, same teeth, same bad attitude. So why are you here? How did you get on board? Probably climbed a rope at port, or stowed away in a barrel. You might have been born here, in the dark, beneath the floorboards, with the groaning of the sea as your first lullaby. It's poetic if your idea of poetry includes parasites. Let that sink in for a second. You didn't choose this life, it chose you. Or maybe the universe just rolled its dice and laughed when you came up soggy rodent with no exit plan. But here's the real kicker. As awful as this sounds, this rat's life might be better than the sailors'. You don't get whipped. You don't sign up for war. You don't have to climb the rigging in a hurricane with a rope around your waist and a prayer in your mouth. You hide, you steal, you survive, quietly, efficiently, persistently, until they catch you. But we'll get there, because what's worse than being a rat? Being a rat stuck on a ship full of humans. Welcome to your new floating prison, you scamp. Step right in, or rather scurry and feast your twitching little eyes on the architectural marvel that is an 18th century sailing vessel. If you've ever dreamed of living in a dark, damp coffin filled with men slowly turning into soup, you're in for a treat. This, dear viewer/rat, is home. First, let's get you oriented. You're somewhere near the keel, the very bottom of the ship, the bilge, where the water, sewage, spilled grog, rat droppings, and human sadness all swirl together like the worst soup you'll never stop drinking. The floor here is slick with slime, the air thick enough to chew. If oxygen had a texture, it'd be this gritty, fungal, and mildly insulting. Now, let's go up a level. Above your luxurious bilge suite is the orlop deck, an area that sounds fancy but is really just where they store the injured. Men missing limbs, bleeding sailors with a 40% chance of survival and a 100% chance of smelling like death warmed over. You might want to avoid this floor unless you're feeling peckish. Yes, rats have been known to snack on the recently unconscious. No judgment. It's not personal. It's protein. Above that, we've got the gun deck. Cannons, gunpowder, terrified. Teenagers with soot-covered faces, pretending they're not one loud bang away from wetting their britches. This area is your playground. Lots of nooks to hide in, barrels to crawl into, and occasionally the opportunity to steal biscuit crumbs. Dropped by panicked midshipmen. Let's continue our upward mobility. The main deck is where the real action happens. If by action you mean hard labor, emotional breakdowns, and an endless game of don't fall off. It's where the sails are managed, where the rigging snaps under pressure, and where sailors scream into the wind like they're auditioning for an 18th century heavy metal band. As a rat, you generally avoid this deck during the day. Too much stomping, too much yelling. At night, though, it's rat central. You and your rodent brethren race across the planks like it's Mario Kart, only instead of banana peels, it's actual human vomit. Then there's the quarterdeck, where the officers pace and mutter about things like wind direction and scurvy statistics. You don't go up here unless you have a death wish or an appetite for powdered wigs and suppressed trauma. The captain lives nearby, in a cabin that smells like ink, desperation, and the faint regret of having joined the Navy to impress someone who never wrote back. Now, let's talk materials. Everything around you is wood. Oak, pine, whatever trees were most plentiful when the ship was built by underpaid dock workers half a continent away. Wood so dry in some places it cracks like brittle bones, and so saturated in others it squelches when stepped on. The hull groans constantly, not metaphorically, it actually groans, like a whale with indigestion. As a rat, you become intimately familiar with every creak, every knot, every warm place to sleep that won't result in being stepped on. And oh, the smells. Let that sink in. Rotting salt pork, human sweat baked into wool, tobacco smoke curling through the beams, gunpowder residue, wet rope, feet, dead things, live things that should probably be dead. It's not just an assault on the nose. It's full-blown chemical warfare. But you thrive in this. This is odor-rat paradise. It's home-cooked. Stench with a base note of despair. Need some fresh air. Too bad. Ventilation is a joke, a cruel one. The ship is built to trap air, not circulate it. Below decks, the atmosphere is humid enough to grow mushrooms on your tail. And guess what? It does. Mold grows everywhere, including inside your lungs. Probably that persistent cough. Totally normal. You're breathing in history's compost. Pile. Still, there's something oddly peaceful about it all. The gentle sway of the ship, the rhythmic splash of the sea against the hull, the snoring of a sailor who hasn't bathed since last winter. For a moment, it's almost ... tranquil. Romantic, even. If you forget the diseases, and the fact that the walls might literally be on fire at any given moment because someone dropped a lantern into a gunpowder barrel. And let's not forget the food storage room, your personal amusement park. Barrels of hardtack infested with weevil's extra protein, sacks of flour that double as nesting sites, salted beef harder than the planks it sits on. This room is your lifeline and your playground. You'll claw, chew, and dive into it like it's Black Friday at a grocery store with no health codes. Of course, the humans occasionally come in and try to set traps. Poor fools. You've memorized every squeaky board, every shadow, every pattern of their drunken lurching. You hear them coming before they even finish thinking, Maybe I'll check the biscuit barrel today. You're the phantom of the food. Hold, a fuzzy blur with judgment in your beady little eyes. Now, as you curl into a frayed corner of canvas and shiver from the chill that seeps through every pore of this wooden monstrosity, you might ask, is this really the best the age of sail had to offer? The answer is, unfortunately, yes, because for all the flags and fanfare, the grand voyages and naval glory, most ships were just barely controlled chaos, floating on centuries of bad decisions and worse sanitation and the rats. You were the only ones who truly adapted, who learned the cracks, the moods of the sea, the rhythm of the boots above. You became the heartbeat of the ship, small, filthy, indestructible. But don't get too cozy, because while you might know every hiding spot and food source, there's one thing you haven't yet faced: the sailors themselves, and they're hungry. Let's take a moment to appreciate the deeply dysfunctional, deeply aromatic, floating society you now call home. This ship, this creaking rat-infested tinderbox lurching across the sea, isn't just wood and wind, it's a zoo. A vertical village of sweaty bipeds, all pretending not to be slowly losing their minds. You're not just a rat anymore. You're a silent witness to the parade of humanity, the dirty, drunk, and deliriously doomed. Let's start at the top of the pecking order. The captain, a man whose hat is often larger than his personal hygiene. He is the voice of law, the master of navigation, and, more importantly, the only guy who gets his own cabin and doesn't have to sleep next to someone who snores like a dying accordion. He's educated, literate, usually perpetually annoyed, and often trying to pretend the rats you aren't currently chewing through the papers on his desk. The captain rules with one eye on the horizon and the other, twitching from stress-induced scurvy. Next down the ladder, the first mate. Think of him as the underpaid middle manager of this nautical nightmare. He's the one barking orders, enforcing punishments, and desperately trying to keep 150 resentful men from stabbing each other over the last bite of weevil-infested biscuit. His hobbies include shouting, threatening, and lying awake at night wondering if mutiny is scheduled for Tuesday or Wednesday. Then come the officers and specialists, the sailing master, the navigator, the gunner. These are the technical nerds of the ship. They know how to steer it, aim it, fix it, but none of them can cook, and most of them are just trying to not get blamed when everything inevitably catches fire. They also leave crumbs when reading maps late at night, which, for you, is a full-course meal with a side of paper. And now we descend into the chaos pit. The regular sailors, the swabbies, deckhands, rope monkeys, men of various nationalities, and questionable hygiene, united by their hatred of authority and fondness for grog. These are your closest parallels. Like you, they spend their days dodging boots, fighting for food, and huddling in the dark, wondering what that smell is. Spoiler. It's them. Let's meet a few of them, shall we? There's gunner's mate Bill, who's missing 3 fingers, but insists he can still tie knots better than anyone else. He talks to his cannon like it's his pet cat, and once tried to shoot a seagull because it looked suspicious. Then, we've got Tiny Tom, who is neither tiny nor named Tom. He's 6'4", terrified of rats, and has a tattoo that says land or bust on his stomach. No one's told him that's not a real destination. Over there is Mick, the cook, a man who can turn boiled leather into soup and make it taste worse than the leather. You'll come to know him intimately, mostly because his pantry is your version of Disneyland. Just mind the cleaver. And who could forget the powder monkey, a child, usually around 10 to 13 years old, whose job is to run gunpowder from storage to the cannons during battle. Yes, they gave explosives to children. Different times. The powder monkey is fast, covered in soot, and often sleeps with one eye open because he once saw a rat chewing on a fuse and hasn't recovered since. That rat was probably you. Let's not ignore the real wild card, the ship's surgeon. Equal parts doctor, butcher, and enthusiastic amateur chemist. His tools include saws, rum, and regret. You might spot him late at night, writing in a blood-stained ledger while ignoring the scratching noises behind the wall again. That's you. Now here's a fun twist. Many ships had pets. Dogs, cats, monkeys, even pigs. You, of course, are not considered a pet. You are a menace. But some sailors blur the line. One or two might toss you a crust now and then. Others try to kill you on sight. It's really a spectrum, somewhere between unwelcome guest and occasional companion. And let's not forget the press-ganged men, conscripts, who were volunteered at the end of a stick. Often drunk, sometimes kidnapped. They wake up at sea, hungover, confused, and allergic to work. They make terrible sailors, but excellent bunkmates. They snore deeply and drop snacks. Hierarchy aboard a ship is a delicate thing, a mix of brute force, naval tradition, and everyone pretending not to notice when someone goes missing after a night argument. But as a rat, you live outside this structure. You answer to no one. You don't get flogged. You don't salute. You just ... exist. Parasite adjacent. Observer, survivor. Still, you have your own kind of society. Your fellow rats operate on instinct and experience. There's an order to the chaos. Dominant rats claim the best nesting spots. Others scurry along support beams, hoping not to get noticed. You've got alliances, rivals. That one rat with the twitchy leg who always ruins everything in a weird way. Your world and theirs mirror each other. Rats and sailors both follow unwritten rules. Both endure cramped quarters and uncertain futures. And both are remarkably good at surviving things they shouldn't. You're living proof that civilization, if you can call this splintering, a civilization doesn't need to be noble to be functional. It just needs to limp forward, day after miserable day. But here's where it gets interesting. You, the rat, watch them. Every spilled drink, every whispered threat, every secret stash of tobacco hidden behind a beam. You see it all. You could write volumes if rats wrote books. Instead, you leave. Droppings, close enough. And as you nibble on a forgotten crust behind a barrel, you sense a shift. Something ... off. The crew is tense, jumpy. Supplies are running low. The cook's stew now smells even less edible than usual. Fights are starting. Eyes linger too long on the food stores, on the biscuits, on the ... rats. Because when the stomach starts growling and the ocean still stretches on for weeks, the line between vermin and protein starts to blur. You might be the lowest creature aboard this ship, but you also might be dinner. That magical part of the day when both sailor and rat unite under one universal truth. Everything here tastes like the inside of a boot. You're hungry, you're always hungry, but so is the entire crew, and what you're all fighting over. The saddest buffet ever to cross the Atlantic. Let's start with the human menu, or, as it should more honestly be called, the culinary crimes of the 18th century. The main course, hardtack. Imagine biting into a piece of drywall that's been baked, salted, and left under a corpse for a week. Now make it older than your captain. That's hardtack. It's basically a bread fossil. Sailors had to soak it in water, beer, or spit just to soften it. You don't bother. Your teeth are stronger, and your standards, bless them, are subterranean. Then there's the salted meat, usually beef or pork. But after 3 months at sea, who's counting? This stuff is so salty, it's technically a weapon. Preserved in barrels and fermented in misery, it's tough enough to double as a bludgeon. And sometimes it came with extra surprises, maggots, a little protein bonus, free of charge. You, of course, are thrilled. The sailors see horror. You see opportunity. The soft centers of wormy biscuits. Delightful. The bits of fat clinging to the side of a barrel. A 5-star experience. To them, this food is punishment. To you, it's fine. dining, with a hint of mold. Let's not forget the peas and beans, usually dried, occasionally rehydrated, and always disappointing. When the water ran low, which was often, meals became even sadder. No soup, just handfuls of half-cracked legumes that tasted like sawdust and regret. Speaking of water, oh, you sweet, naive soul, you think they drank fresh water. Sure, for the first week. Then it ran out or turned green and chunky. The barrels grew algae, sometimes worms. One sailor wrote that the water smelled of dead cats. He wasn't being metaphorical. He was just ... being honest. So instead, they drank grog, diluted rum. But we'll get to that nightmare in another chapter. For now, just know that when it comes to staying hydrated, most sailors chose mild alcoholism over hydration roulette. And what about you, dear rat? What's on your plate today? Well, aside from whatever you steal from theirs, you feast on spilled grain, crumbs, the occasional hunk of candle wax, and anything that's dead and squishy enough to chew. This includes rope, leather, and, if you're feeling adventurous, your fellow rats. Yes, cannibalism is on the menu. Not because you're evil, just practical. You're a survivalist. A tiny furry Gordon Ramsay with no budget and zero moral compass. It's worth noting, sailors sometimes ate you too. Not often, not proudly. But when the food ran out, when the sea wouldn't yield fish, and when their stomachs felt like they were eating themselves, a rat stew started sounding less like a punishment and more like a warm memory. They'd catch you, skin you, boil you, and tell themselves it tasted like rabbit. It didn't. It tasted like you. Let that sink in. One day you're nibbling on a crust behind a crate. The next, you're in the crate, seasoned with desperation. Now, onto the ship's cook, the unsung villain of every meal. His kitchen, if you can call a firebox and a swinging pot a kitchen, is a blackened, soot-covered corner near the bow. The ingredients he has, rotten. The tools, crude. The vibe, hostile. He's not a chef. He's a food necromancer, trying to resurrect flavor from long-dead ingredients. Spoiler, he fails. Repeatedly, every few days, the crew gets something called lobscouse, a grey, gelatinous stew of meat, biscuit crumbs, and boiled sadness. It smells like defeat. You love it, especially the bits that slosh over the sides and pool beneath the pot. That's yours now. Some days they bake. Biscuits, mostly. The flour is often full of weevils, which isn't a bug, it's bonus nutrition. You've learned not to even flinch when they crawl across your nose. It's just Tuesday now and then, if you're lucky. The ship stops at a port and restocks. Fruit, fresh bread, cheese. But it's rare. And the good stuff disappears faster than a powder monkey in a storm. Within hours, the mold is back. The rats, your people, are thrilled. The sailors are not. And yet, despite all this, food is power. It controls morale, hierarchy, even sanity. Officers hoard it. Cooks guard it. Sailors fight over it. And you steal it. Night after night, a tiny pirate in the pantry. No flag, no mercy. Just hunger and a good sense of where the biscuit barrel creaks. But here's where the balance tips. As the voyage drags on, supplies dwindle, rats multiply, rations shrink. The food wars begin. Sailors accuse each other of hoarding. Fights break out. The cook starts locking the pantry. The officers start rationing grog. The smell of despair is replaced by something sharper. Desperation. You're smart. You feel it coming. They start watching the shadows more closely, setting more traps. One sailor sharpens a knife a little too slowly when he sees you scurry past, and one night you find something that freezes your tiny blood. A skinned rat hung by the tail, left outside the pantry. A warning, a message. They're not just running out of food. They're looking at you, not as a pest, as a meal. There's a rhythm to life at sea. The creak of the mast, the slap of waves, the occasional distant scream, and most predictably the unmistakable sound of someone retching into a bucket, or over the railing, or onto their own boots. And often it all starts with grog. Now, let's be clear. Grog is not a cocktail. It is not a refreshing beverage. It is the drink equivalent of giving up. A cruel concoction of rum and water mixed together not for taste, but for survival. The water on board, undrinkable after the first week, teeming with algae, worm larvae, and particles of, let's just say, mystery. So they laced it with alcohol, hoping the rum would kill the bad stuff, and, ideally, the memories. And it worked. Sort of. Sailors didn't just tolerate grog, they clung to it like a life raft made of bad decisions. The standard issue, half a pint of rum per sailor per day, mixed with a full pint of water, twice daily, like clockwork. The logic was simple. Keep them just drunk enough to follow orders. Not so drunk they start sword fighting each other over who gets the hammock closest to the breeze, and you, little rat, you're no stranger to grog. Either you've tasted it, maybe not directly, though a bold few of your kind have been spotted, lapping from spilt mugs like tiny unrepentant pirates. But you felt the effects. The men get slower, clumsier, hungrier. Their balance disappears, and so do their inhibitions. You could waltz across a sailor's boot while he's mid-monologue about sea serpents, and he'd just blink twice and go back to humming shanties to himself. Let's paint a picture. It's the evening ration. The sun's dropping. The ship rocks. Gently, the crew lines up, mugs out, eyes half dead with fatigue, but sparking just slightly with anticipation. The quartermaster ladles out the grog, sloshing it into cups with all the delicacy of a man stirring soup with a stick. A few mutter thanks. Most don't, they just drink. Within the hour, the mood changes. Voices get louder. Cards come out, shouts, echo. Somewhere, someone starts singing, poorly. Somewhere else, someone vomits, impressively, and you retreat to your hiding spot beneath the water cask, watching the scene unfold like a drunk rodent anthropologist. The vomit is constant, predictable. Sometimes it's just from drinking. Sometimes it's seasickness mixed with grog-induced optimism. Sometimes it's from the food, which, as you've tasted, is emotionally traumatic even when you're sober. The floorboards grow slick, the corners reek of stale puke. It soaks into the wood and into the men. And into you, frankly, still. There are ... advantages. A grog-happy sailor might leave his biscuit unguarded. A sleeping drunk might roll away from his post, exposing a fresh stash of cheese rinds, and in their inebriated state, they're less likely to spot you scurrying underfoot. They might even talk to you, mistaking you for some long-lost friend, or possibly God. It's happened, but grog's not just a drink. It's a cultural glue. It's how sailors bond, argue, mourn, celebrate. Every major event, good or catastrophic, is followed by an extra ration. Survived a storm. Grog won a skirmish. Grog lost a man overboard and found only his boot. Double grog. They say alcohol dulls the senses. That's the point. This ship is a floating stress factory. Men packed in like salted fish, working themselves, raw aching in places they didn't know they had. So grog becomes the nightly anesthetic. A blur. A soft lens through which the horrors of sea life become just a little less sharp. Of course, the officers try to regulate it. They water it down, ration it, pretend they're in control. But then they retire to their cabins and sip their own private stores of much better, much purer rum. You've seen it, you've smelled it. You've gnawed the cork off one such bottle yourself and had a taste. You blacked out for 6 hours and woke up inside a boot. And when grog runs low, the mood shifts drastically. Withdrawals begin. Tempers flare, fights erupt over spilled drops. One sailor, you might recall, tried to make fake grog by fermenting raisins and seawater in a tin cup. He went blind for a week and gained a spiritual following from 3 equally drunk decans. They named him Prophet Tony. He has since been demoted to mop duty. But here's the catch. Grog might numb the mind, but it can't hold back the storm. Not the one in the sky, and not the one brewing in the crew's stomachs and souls. Drunken sailors are rowdy, unpredictable, and prone to doing very stupid things with ropes, knives, and emotional baggage. You watch, night after night, as the ritual repeats. Pour, drink, slur, fight, sleep. The ship stinks of stale liquor and bad choices, and you, ever present, ever silent, move through the aftermath, cleaning the crumbs, dodging boots, judging quietly. It's not glamorous, it's not romantic, but it's consistent. Grog, vomit, repeat. That's the cycle. That's the heartbeat of the ship. Still, even as the laughter echoes and the mugs clink, you can feel something underneath it all. A tension, a pressure. The grog is masking it, yes, but barely, because drunk men get brave, and brave men do. Stupid things, like fighting in storms, or chasing rats, and storm clouds are forming. Literally the wind changes first. That's how you know, before the shouting, before the flurry of boots overhead, before the entire world tilts like a drunk sailor reaching for his last crumb of cheese. You feel it in your whiskers, a pressure shift, a breath held by the sea itself, and then everything goes wrong at once. The storm doesn't arrive politely. It barrels over the horizon with the subtlety of cannon fire. One moment, the sky is just moodily grey. The next, it's a solid wall of black clouds hurling lightning like it's late for a thunder party. You, a shiprat with impeccable instincts and very little dignity, know exactly what to do. Run, not out of fear. Out of survival reflex honed over generations of dodging thunder, boots, and boiling stew. Above deck, chaos. Absolute, glorious, nautical chaos. The crew erupts like a kicked anthill. Orders are barked, ignored, and rebarked louder. Men scramble to reef the sails, climb the rigging, and tie down anything that isn't already airborne. The ship tilts dangerously, groaning under the pressure, and you cling to a beam with all four claws, eyes wide, heart racing, tail wrapped around a rusty nail like it's your childhood security blanket. This isn't your first storm, but it doesn't get easier. Every plank feels like it might splinter. Every wave that crashes against the hull sounds like a cannonball made of ocean and ill intent. The air turns electric. Somewhere nearby, a lantern swings wildly before smashing into a bulkhead, exploding into shards in panic. A sailor screams, another laughs, and you, tucked beneath a crate of moldy turnips, contemplate the irony of dying in a storm named after some monarch you never voted for. Let's slow this down. Breathe it in. The rain doesn't fall, it attacks. Horizontal sheets of water slam the deck. Ropes thrash like angry snakes. The sails flap with violent fury until they're either tied down or torn to pieces. Every crevice of the ship begins to leak. Water seeps into places you didn't even know had corners. The bilge fills rapidly, and your cozy nest behind the biscuit barrel, flooded, gone. Hope you didn't have sentimental attachments. The men are tied to the ship with rope around their waists, literally lashed to the beast that's trying to kill them. Their eyes are wild, shirts soaked, skin wind-burned. They shout over the roar, but it's useless. The storm drowns everything. The wheel spins violently, manned by someone clearly regretting every career choice that led to this moment. Lightning cracks. The mast shudders. You can smell ozone and fear. It's easy to think of storms romantically. Great epics talk about battling Poseidon, staring into the abyss, taming the sea with human will. But this is just survival. Wet, slippery, unheroic survival. You dig your claws into the wood as the ship lurches again, almost tossing you into the freezing slop swirling on the floor. You squeak, not bravely, just instinctively. You sound ridiculous, but so does everyone else right now. A hatch bursts. Open, water pours in. A crate breaks free and rolls across the deck, bowling over a sailor mid-prayer. Another man clings to the rail, eyes shut, muttering something about his mother, the Virgin Mary, or possibly his favorite chicken. You can't hear over the thunder. You're too busy not dying. And then, as if summoned by the gods of narrative timing, the ship takes a wave broadside. It hits like a sledgehammer dipped in spite. Everything not nailed down becomes airborne. Barrels roll. Men tumble. You fly. For a moment, your tiny rat body is suspended in mid-air, tail flailing, time slowing like a dramatic painting of poor decisions and atmospheric moisture. You crash into something soft. It's bread, stale, wet, but bread. You cling to it, not because it's food, but because it floats. Around you, debris swells. A sailor slides past on his stomach, yelling something that sounds like "tell my wife she was right," before colliding with a bucket. You scramble to higher ground. The beams overhead offer a precarious refuge. You climb, slip, climb again. Lightning strikes the mast. The light is blinding, searing your beady eyes, illuminating the deck in ghostly detail. Men soaked and screaming, the ocean boiling with fury, the sails in tatters. It's chaos, but it's also ... beautiful, in the way that disasters often are. From a safe distance. Except you're not at a safe distance. You're very much in it. Now let's pause, because in the middle of all this madness, the shrieking wind, the crashing waves, the genuine fear of becoming rat soup, you realize something. The ship isn't fighting the storm, it's riding it. It was built for this. However rickety, moldy, and half-eaten by rats it may be, this vessel is a survivor, and you're on board. Whether you like it or not, hours pass, maybe days. Time is meaningless when you're soaked, shivering, and clinging to a beam that smells like fish and despair. Eventually, the storm relents. The thunder fades, the wind dies, the rain becomes a drizzle. The sea settles into a sullen churn, and silence follows. Heavy, broken only by coughing, moaning, and the creak of timber adjusting to stillness. The men slump, exhausted, broken, but alive. Some have vanished, swept away, claimed by the sea. No ceremony, just absence. The survivors stumbled below deck, too tired to speak, too sore to care. They collapse wherever they can, some into hammocks, some into barrels. One falls asleep on a cannon, and you curl up in a damp sock, somewhere near the water cask, cold, sore, but breathing. You made it, but you won't rest easy, because as terrifying as the storm was, it was just weather. Something worse is coming, and you brought it with you. It starts with a cough, always does. Just one, ragged, wet, innocent enough. Then another, and another. A chorus of wheezes, rising from the dark, damp corners of the ship. The men assume it's nothing. Salt air in the lungs, rope burns in the throat, a rough night of grog and regret. But you, oh you clever little parasite, you know better, because this isn't just a ship, it's an incubator, and you, dear rat, are a carrier. Now, don't take that personally. You didn't ask to be a biological weapon. You were born into it, carved from a bloodline of unintentional murderers, trailing fleas like glitter at a craft fair. You carry more disease than the average 18th century. Apothecary has words for an, they have lots of words, most of them made up. Let's begin with the headliner, the plague. Yes, that plague, the bubonic one, the one with the boils and the blackened limbs and the entire villages wiped off the map. The Black Death wasn't a one-time show, it had sequels. And rats, or rather, the fleas you chauffeur around like there in a tiny Uber, were often the suspected culprits. On land, in port, and yes, at sea. Fleas don't need tickets to board. They ride you, they hop, they multiply, they bite. Then they jump to a sailor's ankle, inject a microscopic horror, and scuttle off before breakfast. And the sailor, he has no idea that the scratch on his leg is about to become a full-blown death sentence. Of course, plague isn't your only party trick. Let's talk typhus, spread by lice, carried in filth, thriving in exactly the kind of crowded, sweaty, unwashed conditions found on naval ships. Symptoms, fever, delirium, blotchy skin, and usually a slow, pathetic death. Treatment, isolation, and luck. Often, the infected were tossed in a corner, muttering fever dreams, while rats, yes, including you, tiptoed around them, hoping they wouldn't twitch too hard. Then there's dysentery, lovingly referred to by the crew as the bloody flux. Catchy name, less catchy symptoms, unless you enjoy explosive diarrhea and dehydration. You know what helps spread dysentery? Contaminated water. And guess what? Every water barrel on this ship has been graced by your footprints, tail, and occasional droppings. You are, quite literally, in their drinks. Now, let's sprinkle in some scurvy, the glamorous disease of citrus deficiency. Teeth fall out, gums swell like bruised fruit, joints ache, wounds reopen. It's slow, it's miserable, and it's preventable if they have lemons. Which, let's be honest, they don't. Not unless the voyage is short or someone smuggled a lemon under their hat. You don't cause scurvy, technically, but you don't help. In fact, you've been known to nibble at what little fruit remains. Just a few bites. Just enough to make the human population sink into vitamin-deficient despair. Let's not forget yellow fever, or cholera, or rat bite fever. Yes, that's real. All diseases that float through the decks like ghostly hitchhikers. The ship is no longer a vessel of exploration. It's a biological time bomb, and you're tucked snugly in the fuse. You notice it spreading long before the crew does. The change in rhythm, fewer footsteps, more groans. That one man who used to sing off-key sea shanties while peeling potatoes, silent now, curled in his hammock, sweating like a sunburned priest. His neighbor sneezes blood. The powder monkey has stopped moving, and suddenly there's more space on deck. The officers hold a meeting, voices raised, accusations flying. It's the food, it's the cook, it's the devil. No one mentions rats, not yet. That's still taboo. Because to name you is to confront the fact that their misery might have whiskers, and live behind the bread bin. Eventually, they try something desperate. They fumigate the lower decks, light incense, burn vinegar-soaked rags. A few even pray. One sailor insists garlic stuffed in the ears wards off disease. Another wears a dead chicken tied around his neck. Medical science, in this era, is 1 part guesswork, 2 parts superstition, and 9 parts fire hazard. And still, they drop, one by one. Hammocks sag, but no longer swing. The cook stops cooking. The surgeon sharpens his bone saw, even when there are no surgeries, just in case. You, however, are thriving. Disease doesn't bother you. You're a tank, an apocalypse-proof ball of fur and teeth. You eat the same moldy food, drink the same foul water, breathe the same foul air, but you endure. The world burns down around you, and you keep twitching, tail high, and that, perhaps, is the cruelest irony of all. The sailors fear the sea, the storms, the battles, but the thing that's killing them, it's already on board, tiny, furry, nestled between the bulkheads. You let single quotes take a breath. This isn't your fault. Not really. You didn't invent the diseases. You just carry them, spread them. Live among the rot and the waste because that's what you've been bred for. You're a symptom of a larger problem, the arrogance of man, thinking he could trap the ocean in wood and sail it without consequence. Still, guilt doesn't exist in your vocabulary. You don't worry, you don't mourn, you move on, crawl past the hammocks of the dead, nudge open the pantry door, seek out the last crumb of cheese behind the barrel, because while the ship coughs and moans and mourns, it's dead. You do what you always do. You survive, and tomorrow someone notices you, and suddenly survival becomes a lot more complicated. Boom, that's the first thing you hear. A low, belly-deep rumble, followed by the unmistakable percussion of panic, cannon fire. The ship shudders as if the ocean itself is trying to shake all the vermin loose, including you. Welcome to naval combat, where every plank is a potential coffin and every rat, by pure proximity, becomes accidental cannon fodder. From your vantage under a tangle of rope, the Battle isn't glorious or heroic. It's chaos. Organized, badly planned chaos. Men rush to their stations, their faces pale but determined. Orders are screamed, but the thunder of guns drowns out any meaning. The gunner's mates shove charges down the barrels. The powder monkeys bought. Really, some barely older than the ship's cheese-run gunpowder cartridges from the magazine to the guns. Each trip is a sprint through smoke and the kind of danger that makes your tail bristle. The air thickens with the stink of burnt powder and fear. You taste both, sharp and bitter. The wooden hull rattles with every blast, dust and debris raining from the beams. Occasionally, the ship lurches hit by enemy fire or the recoil of its own cannons. Barrels roll, muskets clatter. Men yell for more powder, for water, for their mothers. You dart from hiding spot to hiding spot, narrowly avoiding boots and falling debris. Let's get personal for a moment. Your average rat in peacetime is a nuisance. In battle, you become a symbol of luck, of doom, of whatever the crew's superstition can conjure in the smoke. Some sailors believe a rat running up from the bilge is a sign the ship is about to sink. Others think killing a rat during a fight will curse them with bad aim or worse rations. Either way, you're now the subject of nervous glances and whispered curses, which is rich, considering they're the ones firing cannons in a floating tinderbox. A cannon shot tears through the hull. Splinters fly long sharp, deadly as any blade. You flinch as a hot splinter buries itself in a nearby crate. The man beside it isn't as lucky. He screams, clutches his arm, blood blooming dark on his sleeve. The surgeon rushes in, his apron already stained. You can smell the copper temps of blood over the gunpowder. It's a bad sign, but you press deeper into the shadows, surviving. On instinct and a very practical lack of heroism. Powder monkeys zip past you, hands full of gunpowder cartridges. These kids are fast, nimble, and always a little afraid of you. There's a reason. During lulls, you and your kin have been known to chew through powder bags, tempted by the salty sweat that soaks every surface. Sometimes you even get into the magazine itself, nibbling the fuses. The resulting explosions. Let's just say more than one ship's accidental detonation had a rat-shaped culprit. But hey, who's keeping score? Spoiler, the captain. He's furious. Above, on the gun deck, you can barely see through the rolling smoke. Sailors load, fire reload in a staccato rhythm. The noise is deafening. Each broadside rattles your bones. Between salvos you catch glimpses of the enemy's ship-tattered sails, desperate faces, the same chaos reflected back. A cannonball whistles overhead, smashing into the mainmast. The ship shudders. Men shout, with screams in protest. Then comes the boarding alarm. Grappling hooks bite the railings. Pistols crack, blades flash. Men leap from ship to ship, howling like wild animals. Blood spatters the deck. You freeze, heart hammering, as a man tumbles past, clutching a bayonet in his gut, cursing everything rat. Included, you scramble for shelter, claws slipping on slick planks. Sometimes, the rats become refugees. When a ship is boarded or burning, you and your kin make the most desperate exodus, leaping onto the enemy vessel, swarming down ropes, swimming if you must. Some rats ride planks like tiny furred sailors. History is full of tales about ships, infested with rats after a battle cruise baffled to find their enemies' vermin making themselves at home in the aftermath. It's not sabotage, it's survival. The noise peaks. And then, just as suddenly, the guns fall silent. The ships drift apart. battered and bleeding. The dead are counted. The living slouch against splintered rails, faces smeared with powder, hands shaking. The surgeon sets up shop on the main deck, blades gleaming in the pale sun. More groans. More blood. Somewhere, a barrel of biscuits is overturned, and you seize your chance racing through the wreckage, stealing a crumb before anyone can bother chasing you. Let's pause here. Let that image settle. Men and rats, both clinging to life in the aftermath of violence they didn't choose. For sailors, the cost of battle is visible lost fingers, burned flesh, haunted eyes. For rats, it's quieter, but just as real. Every cannon blast shakes your world. Every splinter is a spear. You learn to fear the silence after battle most of all. It's when the rats are hunted, when men need to blame something, anything, for their fear and their grief. Tonight, the ship is eerily quiet. No songs, no laughter. Just the gentle lap of waves against battered wood and the muffled weeping of those who lost friends. You curl up in a dark corner, surrounded by crumbs and ash, and listen. Because tomorrow, after the chaos and the smoke, there will be a new kind of terror, the kind that creeps, the kind that whispers, the kind that comes. From within, there's a sound ships make after battling uneasy. Ghostly silence, broken only by the creak of wood and the slow drip of something you're pretty sure isn't water. In that hush, a new tension coils below deck. If storms test the ship's timber, and battle tests its hull, then hunger, boredom, and bitterness test the men. You, a humble rat, know what comes next. Madness. And sometimes, mutiny. It starts subtly, grumbled complaints over meager rations, glances that linger a little too long on the officers' plates. The cook locks the pantry now, hiding the dwindling stores as if secrecy could multiply biscuits. The men tally every crumb, every ration of grog, every half-spoon of dried peas. And Unimble, insatiable, and still somehow fatter than most of the cruisins, the mood shift. The officers bark orders, but their voices carry less conviction. The captain paces the quarterdeck, eyes dark, fists clenched behind his back. Rumors travel faster than rats. We'll starve before we see port. The captain's hiding stores for himself. The surgeon's gone mad, saw him talking to his own saw. You listen, wide-eyed, from a crack in the bulkhead, as men whisper about rebellion. Let's pause here. What drives a ship to mutiny? It's not just hunger, though, that certainly helps. It's not even just the endless tedium, the hopelessness that seeps in with each grey dawn. It's the realization that authority, out here, is just a word. The ocean doesn't care who's in charge. The captain's uniform doesn't keep the waves at bay or put food in the galley. And you, shiprat, have the luxury of ignoring all. The rules, humans, not so much. Now, every ship has its powder keg personalities. There's always a Bill or a Jack loud, angry, dangerous. Here, he's called Big Harry. You know him well. He once threw a boot at you, missed, and fell off his hammock. Harry hates the officers, hates the food, hates that the sea won't end. He's a natural leader, if by leader you mean man most likely to bludgeon someone over a biscuit. When the whispers of mutiny start, they swirl around Harry like flies on a rotting orange. But mutiny is more than shouting and waving knives. It's a quiet cancer, spreading through the decks. A grudge here, a stolen ration there. You watch as factions form, old shipmates turning cold, men refusing to share stories at night. Even the powder monkeys look haunted. You scurry past the cook's quarters and hear sobbing whether from hunger, fear or rage, you can't tell. Then comes the breaking point. The storm passes, the food runs lower, and one morning, the bosun finds the bread locker empty. Not just empty gnawed through, the men lose it. Accusations fly, fingers point at you and your kin, but this time, suspicion spreads wider. Maybe it's not just rats eating the stores. Maybe someone's hoarding. Maybe the captain's lying. Paranoia festers. The captain calls a meeting. He stands before the crew, jaw set, pistol tucked in his belt, reading from a scrap of paper that promises discipline, order, a fair share for all lies. Everyone knows, but what else can he do? Harry heckles him. The crew jeers. Someone throws a moldy potato. The powder monkeys vanish into the shadows, hiding with you. And just like that, the dam breaks. Voices rise, blades flash. Someone shouts, "Down with the captain." Men surge forward. The officers draw swords, but they're outnumbered. In the chaos, you watch from behind a barrel, heart pounding, tail quivering. The surgeon dives for cover, clutching his ledger. The cook sprints for the galley. Harry grabs the captain by the collar and drags him to the rail. But mutiny isn't a neat affair. It's not a clean coup or a single dramatic moment. It's confusion, violence, regret. Men hesitate. Old loyalties spark. Someone tries to mediate, fails, gets punched. In the scramble, the captain manages to break free. Pistol firing wild grew. The crew scatters, the threat of real blood, cooling tempers. For now afterward, everything is different. The captain remains wounded, humiliated, but alive. Harry is thrown in irons, promising revenge. The officers post guards at every hatch. The men slink away, silent and sullen. The air is thick with distrust. And you, clever rodent, understand. The social order is broken. No one trusts anyone. The rules, such as they were, have dissolved into chaos. A new hierarchy emerges. The desperate, the cunning, the ruthless. You feel a kinship with these survivors, but also a tremor of fear. When humans lose hope, they become dangerous, less predictable than storms or disease. Let's reflect for a second. What does a ship become when the crew turns on itself? Not a vessel of adventure, not a floating city, just a wooden prison adrift, a haunted house of bad blood and broken promises. You and your kind have seen it before. The Bounty, ships that became legends, not for their voyages, but for the madness that bloomed aboard. As night falls, the ship is quieter than ever. The rats move silently, sensing the tension. A powder monkey whispers a prayer to a god he's not sure exists. You settle into your corner, curled tight, tail wrapped around your nose, because you know the truth. The storm outside is over, but the real storm, the one that tears apart men's minds, has only just begun. And in that darkness, anything can happen. You may think of yourself now several weeks into your illustrious rodent afterlife phase. Mere blip in the ship's chaos. Vermin, nuisance. Furry intermission in the crew's downward spiral. But here's the surprise twist. Even rats, those infamous avatars of plague and ruin, live out stories thick with drama, heartbreak, and maybe something that resembles love. Let's start with the basics. To the crew, you are an enemy. But in the world behind the bulkheads, between the barrels, and under the folds of canvas, you and your fellow rats have built an underground society. It's less secret society, more family reunion with occasional cannibalism, but the sense of community is there. You have neighbors. That scrawny grey with the notched ear, who always finds the softest sack of flour to nest in. The old black-furred matriarch, missing half her tail, who can outwit any human trap and will fiercely defend her favorite hiding spot behind the water cask. The tiny pink pups squeaking blindly in the dark, whose parents dart back and forth, risking life and whiskers to bring them stray peas or bits of biscuit. There's friendship too. You share the warmth of a nest on cold nights. You warn each other with tiny, high-pitched alarm calls when the cook swings his cleaver a little. To close. You mourn your dead, even if only for a moment, sniffing the still forms, then moving quietly on. The ship's world is brutal, but so is the affection. A rat will groom her siblings, share scraps, curl up nose to tail when the storms hit hardest. And yes, rats have feelings. Science centuries later will run experiments proving you can laugh in ultrasonic squeaks humans can't hear. You can show empathy, even rescue your cage mates from danger. But here, you don't need a laboratory to know loss or loyalty. You feel it every night as you check your nest, count the noses, look for the familiar glint in a friend's eye. Of course, it's not all harmony. The rat world has its bullies, its thieves, its exiles. Fights break out over food, over space, over that mysterious lump of fat under the cook's bed. A newcomer may be driven off with a flurry of bites, while the strongest always eat first. Yet, even in this, there's a pattern, a rough system. The pecking order keeps order, and you've learned to navigate it. You know who to follow, who to avoid, and when to play dead. Once, a young rat, your brother, maybe, or just a familiar shadow got caught in a trap set by the carpenter. The crew found him, laughed, tossed his body overboard with a sneer. You watched from the shadows, chest tight. That night, your whole nest seemed quieter. The next day, a different rat took his place at the edge of the group, watching, waiting. Life goes on. But you remember, the rats are not just surviving. They're adapting, strategizing, enduring. You know the safest paths through the galley. You've mapped every weak spot in the hull, every gap in the pantry door. You know when to risk a dash for spilled beans, when to retreat. And when a rat dies, whether by trap, by hunger, by sailor's boot, the rest learn, the colony adjusts. Every loss is a lesson, sometimes just before dawn. You pause and listen to the soft breaths of your kin, to the low moans of the crew, to the creak and groan of the battered hull. You wonder, in your tiny, frantic mind, if the humans ever feel this connected, or are they lonelier than you, lost in their private fears? Let's slow down. Let that idea settle. The rats, for all their filth and infamy, are in this together. The humans, by contrast, are increasingly divided, suspicious, violent, isolated. The captain locks his cabin. The cook eats alone. The powder monkey whispers to shadows. On some nights, you sense a kind of envy wafting from the bunks above. Maybe they see your resilience. Maybe they sense that, beneath the deck, 100 little hearts keep beating, no matter the storm. But survival comes at a price. You've watched the older rats grow thin, watched the pups dwindle when rations run low. The nest that was once crowded is now full of empty spaces. Still, you keep moving, keep scavenging, keep the colony alive by sheer stubbornness. And in that, perhaps, there's a lesson not just for rats, but for anyone adrift on a merciless sea. The days blur together. Fewer crew above, fewer rats below. You clean your fur. You share a crumb with the smallest in the nest. You curl beside the black-furred matriarch, feeling her heartbeat, slow but steady. You mourn and then move forward, because that's the only thing to do. Imagine dying next to your rat siblings, beneath a barrel of cheese you'll never reach. Let that ache settle in your chest, human or not. Life is short, dark, and full of weevils. But even in the worst places, sometimes you find comfort in the company you keep. The ship groans. The colony sleeps. You press close, not alone, not tonight, because tomorrow, the world above will take notice of you, and the story will move out of the shadows into the logbooks. You think you're invisible, just another shadow slipping through the night, but history disagrees. Because while you're out there gnawing biscuits and nesting in the folds of a mildewed hammock, somewhere above, men are scribbling your exploits into posterity. Rats, it turns out, don't just haunt the ship's timbers, they creep into its very narrative. Welcome to the only place more cramped and musty than the galley. The captain's log, but the ship's log isn't just a weather diary. It's a chronicle of misery, incompetence, brief heroics, and on more days than any captain would like to admit to. There you are, an uninvited guest on every page. The entries are never flattering. 2 biscuits ruined by vermin. Rat found dead in water cask. Crew morale low rations. Again beset by rats. Sometimes it's almost poetic. A black rat seen at dawn. Omen of bad weather. Your PR agent would weep. Let's not limit this to captains, though. The surgeon's journals, the quartermaster's tallies, the cook's ever-dwindling inventory, they all mention you, often with creative profanity. A bored midshipman, stuck on watch, doodles a crude rat beside a sketch of the coast. In the margins, a note, more clever than the bosun. High praise, some logs hint at a weird, reluctant affection. There's the tale of old Molly, the rat who lived in the powder room for 2 whole voyages, dodging every trap, every cat, every angry boot. The bosun claimed she was good luck, and for a time no one dared harm her. When she vanished, or perhaps just clever enough to stow away on another ship, the men poured out a little grog in her honor. You don't get a statue, but in the democratic annals of boredom, that's basically sainthood. Then there are the curses. May every rat on this hell ship drown, writes one sleep-starved sailor after a midnight run-in. Another dreams of a future where ships are made of metal and vermin-free. He'd be devastated to learn rats can chew through almost anything. You, meanwhile, are already testing the boundaries, gnawing into barrels marked private, slipping past guards who nod off after too much grog. There are even love letters, written by desperate crewmen to sweethearts back home. Dearest Mary, I miss you more than I miss clean water. This ship overflows with rats and sorrows, but not an ounce of cheese. There's something oddly comforting about knowing you're a shared misery, a fact of life as constant as the tides or the rats that ran riot through Noah's Ark. Yes, you were there too. You always are. But the logs are more than complaints there. Warnings. If rats flee the hold, brace for trouble. Sailors are superstitious, and for good reason. Rats are the first to know when something's truly wrong. The moment you and your kin make a break for the upper decks, men go pale. Fire. In the galley, leak below the waterline. The rats know before the officers do. Your panic is their early alarm bell. You're the ship's furry, twitchy warning system. Every now and then, a log hints at a failed truce. A lonely sailor adopts a rat, feeds it crumbs, names it after a lost pet from home. The cook throws a boot, the sailor protests, but in the end, Everyone looks the other way. Rats are everywhere, after all. Might as well make peace with one. The rat, naturally, betrays this tentative trust by chewing through the laces of his only boots and stealing his last bit of cheese. Empires rise and fall, but rats will always bite the hand that feeds. There are darker stories, too little tragedies, only a ship can offer. A boy, no more than 12, writes in childish script about the rats that stole his breakfast. 2 days later, his writing stops. Sickness, storm. No one says. The log goes on, indifferent. For every rat memorialized by the crew, a dozen are lost and forgotten, swept overboard, drowned in a flood, crushed beneath careless boots. And still, the next log entry, rats in the hold again. But for all the cursing and catastrophizing, your presence is proof that the ship is still moving, still alive. A ratless ship is a ship abandoned, a ghost vessel drifting empty on a sea of silence. You are both a pest and a pulse. The logs bear witness to this uneasy bargain. The humans complain, the rats persist, and the story floats on. Let's reflect, just for a moment, on the absurdity of it all. Your whole existence, from your first scamper to your last, woven into the tapestry of men's dreams, nightmares, and half-remembered stories. Some will blame you for every calamity. Others will claim you're lucky, the harbinger of landfall or fresh supplies. Either way, you're recorded in ink as much as in tooth marks, and so, as you squeeze behind the water cask, listening to the scratch of the captain's quill overhead, you wonder, are you simply a nuisance, or have you become a legend? Will someone, centuries from now, read these logs by candlelight and shudder, picturing you haunting the shadows of every ship that ever dared cross the world's oceans? Perhaps, or perhaps, like all good stories, yours will fade replaced by new terrors, new passengers, new chapters. But for now, your place in the log is secure. Tomorrow, land beckons, and with it, a whole new set of disasters. After months of drifting, groaning, leaking, and generally proving that wood floats by sheer stubbornness, a new word spreads through the ship's shadowy coastland. For the men above, it's hope. For you and your fellow rats, it's both promise and peril. Because in every port, a fresh disaster awaits, especially if you're small, whiskered, and unreasonably resilient. Harbor arrival isn't a gentle process. Forget the fantasy of a sunlit shore and cheerful townsfolk. Instead, the ship limps into dock like a wounded animal, battered by storms, scarred by battle, and trailing a subtle stink that has the dock workers wincing from 100 yards away. Ropes are tossed, yells echo. Barrels and men alike are hauled. Over the rail, the ship's ratio people sense the energy shift. For the first time in weeks, you smell new things. Spices, manure, tobacco, the bitter reek of harbor sewage. Each whiff is a clue, a warning. You aren't the only stowaway, seeking opportunity. The dock teems with thieves, beggars, cats, dogs, chickens. Pigs, chi species, a seasoned professional at scavenging and dodging boots. But rats, you're the undisputed masters. As soon as a gangplank thumps into place, you and your kin swarm. In every direction, along ropes, across barrels, up the legs of startled sailors. The port is a buffet, but also a battleground. Of course, disaster follows. The sailors know you're trying to abandon ships, so they set traps, postcards, even bribe local urchins to stomp out any rodent escapees. Some ships set their cats loose at the gangway. You sidestep them with practiced ease. After months dodging cleavers and cannon fire, a half-blind tabby isn't much of a threat. But watch out for the dock dogs. One wrong move and you're tomorrow's curiosity in a butcher shop window, sold as exotic meat to a gullible visitor. It's not just the locals that threaten you. The real terror is the human panic your kind inspires. Rats disembarking from a ship are a public health nightmare. Town criers shout warnings, dockmasters threaten quarantine, and officials wield long, terrifying sticks. No port wants to be the next Marseille, which learned the hard way what happens when a single rat population slips through the cracks. Let's talk about Marseille city, nearly brought to its knees in 1720, when plague-ridden rats arrived with a merchant ship and quickly colonized every alley. Within months, bodies piled in the streets. Quarantine failed. The city was locked down for years, its name forever etched into the tragic annals of places ruined by rodents. You, of course, remember none of this. But humans do, and their fear is fresh every time a ship like yours pulls in, groaning with rats, eager for a change of scenery. So now you're in the port. If you're lucky, you slip into a cellar, a grain store, or beneath a wharf to start a new colony. If not, you're stomped, trapped, or drowned. You might even make it onto another ship, stowing away with a fresh crew, carrying news and disease to the next unfortunate destination. Meanwhile, on deck, the crew faces their own disasters. Shore leave is a double-edged sword. For every sailor thrilled at the chance for a hot meal and a mug of untainted beer, there's another who's about to gamble away his pay, catch a dozen new diseases, or wind up press-ganged onto a different ship entirely. The ship becomes a skeleton, crew vanishing into the city, only to stagger back at dawn, penniless and itching in all the wrong places. Sometimes, dockside brings hope. New supplies, new recruits, the rumor of fresh fruit. But mostly, it brings more trouble. Sailors bring women back aboard. Fights break out. Old grudges, fermented on the endless sea, boil over in the cramped chaos of the port. Rumors of rats of urine through the taverns and the tenements. If the port master is nervous, or someone spots a dead rat on the gangplank, the ship might be locked up, quarantined for weeks. Everyone, inside man and vermint, trapped by the city's fear. The rats adapt. You know which docks have the softest bread, which cellars are warmest. Some of your kin never come back to the ship, happily swapping one hell for another. Others die in alleys, claimed by cats, men, or disease. For every successful colony, dozens are wiped out, trampled by feet or swept away by city-wide exterminations. And then disaster strikes again fire. It's a constant threat in port cities. A single lantern tips, a barrel of pitch explodes, and suddenly the wharves are ablaze. You scramble as flames lick at your fur, darting through smoke-choked streets, searching for shelter, your instincts screaming. Many won't make it, but a few always. A few find a hole in a wall, a sewer. Great, a new ship to infest. Let's pause. Breathe that in smoke, ash, desperation, and a hint of roasted grain. You survive, barely. Dockside is no safer than the sea, only differently dangerous. As the ship prepares to leave port, those who survived the chaos, human and rat alike, creep back aboard, wary, thinner, but unbroken. The ropes are pulled in. The hull groans. The next voyage beckons. But if you think dock rats have it rough, just wait. Some ships never leave port again. Some become prisons, tombs, or something worse. And soon you'll see what it's like when the world moves on, but the ship full of hungry, desperate souls remains behind. There are ships that cross the sea with purpose, ships that chase horizons, laden with hope and cargo and men desperate for coin or adventure. And then there are the others, the ones left behind, prison hulks, rotting minnow war stripped of pride and sails, anchored in the stagnant backwaters of history. You know these places, even if you wish you didn't. Welcome, little rat, to the ghost shipper floating grave where time and daylight both go to die. It starts with silence, not the peace of a calm sea or a lull after a storm, but a dead, heavy quiet that settles in every crack of the hull, the laughter, the arguments, the footfalls, replaced by whispers, sobs, and the scurrying of too many rats in too little space. Even you, who can find comfort anywhere, feel the weight of it. The air doesn't move here. The dust tastes old, and the wood is soft with rot. Let's step inside a prison hulk. A ship that once roared into battle now sits chained to the docks. Its guns removed, its decks home to misery. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of convicts, debtors, and unlucky conscripts are packed below deck, living shoulder, shoulder, skin against skin, in air so foul it could knock the fleas off your back. Above, a skeleton crew of guards and cooks pace the deck, half-heartedly watching over the damned. For rats, this is both feast and famine. There's food aplenty, at first mouldy bread, leftovers, the sick and dying who slip away unnoticed. But, as weeks turn into months, the rations shrink. The men grow thin. Disease rages, unchecked. You and your kin pick over scraps and fight for space in the darkness, always wary of traps and sudden boots. Yet here, humans are too weak to chase you. For long, their fear is focused inward, not on the skittering shapes in the shadows. Prison ships aren't meant to last, and you feel it. The timbers weep. Rain seeps through every seam. Every day the world grows, smaller, another body gone, another hole. In the deck, sometimes you sense the ghosts of the ship's past, echoes of drums, distant shouts, a vibration in the bones of the wood. The ship remembers what it once was, but you, pragmatic survivor, know only what it is now. Then there are the true ghost ships, abandoned in quarantine, forgotten after a plague, left to drift until the hull splits or the rats you again finally eat through the last of the stores. You crawl through cabins where even the air is tired. A chair rocks in a breeze that shouldn't be there. A boot, still upright, sits beside a hammock whose owner never returned. Your kind thrive on these floating tombs, living off memories, and whatever remains edible after weeks or years adrift. Occasionally, a boat of officials or scavengers arrives, masked, gloved, faces hidden, voices echoing as they search for signs of life. They find only you and your kin, bold and numerous, scurrying over bones and ink-stained logs. Sometimes they set traps, sometimes fires. Often they simply shudder, leave, and bolt the hatches behind them, hoping the problem will solve itself. Spoiler, it never does. Let's slow down, breathe it in. In this world, the only constant is decay. Each day the ship sinks further into itself, a little more hollow, a little less real. Rats nest in the folds of forgotten uniforms. A human skull rolls across the deck, bumped by your searching nose. Once, a lantern flickers in the galley for no reason at all. If you listen, truly listen, you hear it. The ship sighing. The past pressing in from all sides. There are stories among rats, too. Whispered tales of ships where no men are left, just endless darkness and a cold that never lifts. The bravest among you scab moored. The old matriarch venture into the captain's cabin, unafraid of ghosts or memories. They find nothing but dust, gnawed ledgers, and the distant echo of music played for no one. On some nights, the sea mist curls through broken windows, settling over everything like a shroud. You wonder, in your simple way, if a ship can die, and what happens to those who remain. Humans, ever the romantics, will spin tales of haunted ships, lamps glowing in empty cabins, voices calling from the fog, rats marching in silent procession. You, of course, know the truth. There are no ghosts here, only hunger, cold, and the relentless patience of time. But even you, in the hush before dawn, feel something unnatural, a sadness in the air, a sense that you are living on borrowed time in a place meant only for memories. Yet, even here, life goes on. New litters are born in the galley. Survivors scavenge and squabble, make do, carry on. You clean your fur and curl up with your kin, sharing warmth against the eternal chill. Outside, the world forgets you. Inside, you remember every creak, every shadow dot. So yes, it's bedtime, now worry still, and heavy with the weight of all that's been lost. Because some ships move on, and some, like this one, simply wait half alive, half legend. But even here, in the belly of ghosts, there's a strange, persistent hope tomorrow. The world will return for you, and not everyone knocking on the hull will be friendly. A ship adrift, in memory, is peaceful in its own macabre way, but peace is never built to last, especially not if you're a rat. The world beyond your haunted hull has plans, and those plans have names, boots, and, most frighteningly, traps. Enter the Ratcatcher, the most persistent villain in your story, a sworn enemy armed with poison, fire, and the sort of determination only found in men who have personally counted their missing cheese. Ratcatchers were a special breed. On land, they might be children, the desperate poor, or professionals in patched hats waving dead rodents as trophies. At sea, they were the sailors with the strongest stomachs and the least to lose, given the glamorous task of crawling into bilge dark corners with nothing but a sack and an iron will. You can smell their fear, but also their cunning. These men have lost food, sleep, and maybe a finger or two to your kin. They are out for revenge. The tools of their trade, varied, inventive, and all deeply unpleasant. Poisoned bait mixed with the only decent flour on board, of course. Spring-loaded traps that snap shut with bone-breaking speed. Some favor the time-honored bucket of water, placed strategically beneath a greased pole, where a careless rat will slip, fall, and find itself swimming in circles. You learn to spot these. Sometimes you learn the hard way. Occasionally, a cat is brought aboard, billed as the answer to all vermin-related woes. The truth: most ship cats are too tired, too seasick, or too dignified to care. You've seen more than one Tom curl up beside a nest of pups, purring in a truce born from shared contempt for the humans above. But the humans are relentless. They burn nests, toss barrels overboard, bang on the timbers in the dead of night. To scare you from the galley, some even form rat-hunting parties a regular Friday night, except the only prize is a tally of tiny corpses. The bravest rats, or perhaps the least lucky, become martyrs, reminders to the rest. The war is never over. Why all this effort? Because rats are powerful in their way. Too many, and the ship becomes unlivable. Food disappears. Disease spreads. The very structure is gnawed to dust. It's a numbers game, one the humans intend to win. But you know better. For every trap, there's a smarter rat. For every cull, a hidden nest. Your kind adapts. You've learned to sample poison, but never finish it, to leave the first piece of bait untouched, to watch which corners the catchers check most often. And so, a war of attrition unfolds. The catchers grow more cunning, the rats more elusive. Sometimes, it's hard not to admire them. You've watched a rat catcher, lantern in hand, crawling into the bilge with a look of wild determination. He's muttering curses, flicking his knife at every shadow. He catches one, maybe two, but by morning, 3 more appear, as if conjured. From the very ship itself, the battle spills over into revolution, human, not rat. Every so often, a crew decides enough is enough. Too many rats, too many lost rations, too many sleepless nights listening to the skittering in the beams. They demand new methods, better traps, actual cats that can hunt. If the captain refuses, grumbling about the way things have always been, the crew revolts not with knives, but with protest, refusing to work until something is done. You watch, bemused, as grown men wage bureaucratic war over your existence. Memos are written, schedules drawn. Extra rations promised to whoever catches the most rats this week. Meanwhile, your colony simply moves to decks down and waits for the commotion to pass. History, in its slow, petty way, is changed by you. Pest control becomes naval policy. Ship design evolves. Fewer cracks in the floors, stronger doors on the pantries, dedicated rat guards fitted to the anchor cables. Rats inspire invention ironically, making ships safer, faster, and more efficient, if only to keep you out. But the war never truly ends. New poisons, new traps, cleverer catchers, smarter rats. It's an arms race on a floating splinter, and you're holding your own. You see it in the eyes of the catchers, the grudging respect. Sometimes, when the ship's night is quiet and the moon slices through the porthole, a rat catcher will spot you, raise his lantern, and, for just a moment, nod a truce. Tomorrow, the chase begins again. Let's pause. Breathe in the strange pride of being a survivor in a world built to erase. There's honor in adaptation, in outsmarting those who would end you. The rat catchers come and go, but your legacy is in every chewed rope, every pantry lock, every desperate muttered curse from a man who swore he'd get you this time for sure. And sometimes you wonder, who really wins, the ones with the traps, or the ones who learn to hide better? Is survival a kind of victory, or just an endless game of running, hiding, and outlasting? One day, maybe, there will be no more rats on ships, no more catchers, no more wars in the darkness. But until then, the revolution continues small, twitching, and impossibly stubborn. Tomorrow, the stories will turn to legend, because some rats aren't just survivors. Some change the course of history. History has a soft spot for villains. The pirates, the traitors, the double-crossing diplomats humanity loves to assign blame. But for all the bickering about great men and turning points, the real power, the quiet saboteurs of history, are often small, whiskered, and hopelessly misunderstood. That's right, sometimes. It's the rats who shape the fate of empires. Let's start with the most infamous legacy, plague. The Black Death is a headline act, sure, but its greatest world tour started in the holds of ships. In 1347, rats and Their ever-faithful flea passengers rode into Sicily on Genoese galleys, sneezing and scratching their way into legend. In just a few years, a third of Europe was dead. Ports closed, cities quarantined, peasants and kings alike toppled by something no bigger than a potato with a tail. Did the rats mean to be? Of course not. But intentions aren't history out. Fast forward to the golden age of exploration. As ships fanned out across the globe, so did the rats. When Columbus sailed the ocean blue, he brought not just discovery but stowaways brown rats that would devour the new world's granaries, sparking famines, tipping the scales in wars, and rewriting the ecosystem. It's not hyperbole to say that more than one colonial collapse had a set of incisors at its root. Consider the Siege of Malta. 1565. Ottoman forces held the defenders in a vice, hoping hunger would force surrender. But as food ran low, rats plentiful and plump became the unexpected saviors. The Maltese ate the vermin, survived, and turned the tide. Somewhere, a rat historian is still bitter they never got a statue. Sometimes, the legend is darker. In 1720, a single merchant ship brought plague-infested rats into Marseille. Within weeks, 30,000 dead. Trade paralyzed. The port was blockaded, its quarantine lines brutally enforced. History books blamed the rats, of course, as if a few whiskered saboteurs set out to punish France. No one asked if they just wanted a crust of bread. Rats didn't just change human history, they altered maritime law itself. Superstitions flourished. A mass exodus of rats from a ship was an omen of doom. Sailors would throw precious food overboard if they saw you fleeing, hoping to appease whatever sea god you'd angered. Whole crews would refuse to sail if the rats vanished overnight. Imagine you, with your twitching nose and crusty whiskers, holding a ship's destiny in your tiny paws. And then there's the accidental heroes. In 1812, a British warship's powder magazine began to smoulder, a disaster in the making. A rat, let's call him Percy, for drama's sake trued through a smouldering fuse and, in the process, put it out. The ship survived. Was Percy celebrated? No. He was probably chased away with a broom. Still, a quiet legend among rats. The unsung, unappreciated heroics of the underfoot. Not all historical rat tales end in tragedy. On some ships, rats became mascots. Sailors, alone on endless oceans, would name and feed a favored stowaway, believing it brought luck. If that rat died, its funeral would be more elaborate than any human received. In one case, a Royal Navy frigate in the 1840s held a mock burial at sea for a rat named Old Bristle, complete with a procession and eulogies. Old Bristle, for the record, never gnawed a single roper fact that made him deeply suspicious to his peers. Yet, for every legendary rat, there were scapegoats. Whenever supplies vanished, blame fell on the rats, never mind the midnight snacks of the watch officer or the not-so-secret stash in the surgeon's quarters. If the water went bad, the rats. If someone got sick, the rats. If a mast splintered, surely rats. Never mind that you spent the whole night chewing old leather in the hold. Why the obsession? Because rats are the perfect villain, always present, always unrepentant, utterly immune to lectures about discipline and order. They are chaos in a system built on rules. They are the wild in a world trying to be tamed. And sometimes, just sometimes, they're the scapegoats for problems far bigger than anything you could ever gnaw. Let's reflect. Is this really a story about vermin or about survival? Every chapter of history has a hero and a villain, But what if sometimes they're the same creature? Rats thrived not by malice, but by adapting, by outlasting the traps, the poisons, the cats, and the endless ingenuity of their human adversaries. And in doing so, they left their mark on ships, on cities, on whole civilizations. In a way, rats are history's accidental archivists. They were there for every mutiny, every famine, every grand departure from port. They chewed the bindings of the logs that recorded their own crimes. They were blamed, feared, cursed, and very occasionally celebrated. Their legacy is one of stubborn survival, a footnote that gnawed its way into the margins until, one day, it became the headline. So as you curl up tonight, tiny heart beating in the dark, remember, you are not just a nuisance. You are the unwitting author of chaos, a furry footnote in every major turning point from plague to progress. You are survival made manifest. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for. Tomorrow, your chapter comes to an end, quiet, ordinary, inevitable. But tonight, you are legend. All things aboard a ship have a shelf life. Salt pork turns to stone, sails shred to lace, and even the captain's voice, once thundering, becomes a worn mutter. And you, survivor of storms, plagues, mutinies, and midnight rat-catcher raids, reach the point that no rat knot, even the most legendary, can dodge forever. The end is almost never glorious. But it is, in its small way, a kind of peace. It happens in the slowest of ways. Maybe you wake up with a strange ache, something that won't shake loose, no matter how you stretch or lick your fur. Maybe it's the cold deeper than before, seeping through the hull, through the nests of rags and burlap you once called home. The colony is thinner, fewer squeaks in the darkness, fewer paws scurrying over biscuit crumbs. Even the humans seem tired of hunting you. The ship has slowed to a crawl, floating more from habit than momentum. Some rats go out with a bang, a final, ill-advised dash for the galley, a noble charge across a sailor's boot, a showdown with the ship's half-blind cat. But most fade into the soft anonymity of the shadows. You feel it, the slowing pulse, the heavy limbs, the old wounds that never quite healed. Maybe you lose a fight for food, or you're caught by a sudden lurch of the ship, thrown hard into a barrel you can't escape. Or perhaps, without drama or audience, you curl up in your favorite nook behind the cheese cask, under a forgotten coil of rope, and let the dark take you, gentle as sleep. Your death isn't news. There are no eulogies for ship rats, no lantern-lit vigils or carved gravestones, but still there's a quiet. The colony feels your absence. The old matriarch sniffs your empty corner. The youngest rats pause before moving into your space. Life closes over the gap, as it always does at sea. The great wheel keeps turning. Let's pause. Let that sink in. For all the chaos, your end is humble and noticed by the world above. Sometimes a sailor finds your body, shrugs, and tosses it overboard. Sometimes you simply disappear, joining the layers of history swept into the cracks between timbers. Your story is now just a scent, a memory, maybe a tale told by rats on another crossing. Another night, it's easy to see only the bleakness, the smallness of it all, the lack of spectacle. But in truth, there's a strange beauty here, something that transcends fur and claw. For all their bluster, even the sailors know this feeling. To die quietly, without the world noticing, to vanish into the routine. How many have slipped off the deck in a storm, or succumbed to fever below, their names fading before the next watch is called. You and the crew share this, in the end a brief spark in the dark, gone before the world can even blink. The ship itself seems to mourn in its own way. The hull creaks a little softer. The deck loses a note from its nighttime symphony. Even the rat-catchers, those eternal enemies, may pause and wonder why the scurrying seems less tonight. But there's no poetry in their passing thoughts, just a vague sense that the battle is quieter, the world slightly emptier. Occasionally, a rat's end is noticed. The children aboard those powder monkeys, grown too old for their own good may give a dead rat a burial at sea, a tiny ceremony, half joke, half sincere. It's not out of sentiment, but routine. Another way to break the monotony. For a moment, you are the center of attention. And then, just as quickly, forgotten again. But what if your death is not the end? The colony lives on. A new generation is born in the warmth of the galley, their eyes opening to the same uncertain world you once faced. Your scent lingers, a lesson in every chewed rope and hidden escape. Even the ship battered, but not broken sails on its bones, full of stories only the rats will ever know. Let's reflect, calmly. Take a breath. It's a small life, but not a wasted one. You endured what the world threw at you. Storms, sickness, hunger, the constant press of survival. You bore witness to everything the humans thought. They owned their victories, their failures, their legends. And in your passing, the ship remembers, if only in the faintest, most fleeting way. For all the grand tales of history, most lives end quietly. Most stories are never told. Yours is one of millions, lost beneath the waves or tucked beneath a floorboard. Yet, somehow, that makes it precious and seen, uncelebrated, but real. So, as the night falls, and the ship rocks gently under a sky thick with stars, know this. You lived, you scrapped, you survived. And as your breath slows and the world dims, you slip into that long, restful sleep. Because for rats and sailors alike, there is one universal truth. Eventually, the voyage ends. But maybe, just maybe, something of you remains. So here we are, the end of your epic, flea-riddled odyssey. The ship creaks in the moonlight, half asleep in some forgotten cove, and the world rolls on unaware of the small, persistent lives that scurried beneath its decks. Your story, like so many others, drifts quietly into history's undertow. But is anything ever truly lost at sea? Let's look around at what you, humble rat, have left behind. First, the legacy of adaptation. Every nook you gnawed, every crumb you stole, every escape from the rat-catcher's trap became part of the great unspoken manual of survival. Rats on ships forced humans to adapt to those thicker doors on the pantry, that extra metal sheath on the anchor cable. Thank you, rodent ingenuity. The modern ship, sleeker and more sanitary, owes much to your uninvited innovations. Then there's the culture you shape not by intention, but by simple, stubborn existence. You were the subject of midnight stories, the villain in countless tall tales, the surprise guest at every shipboard meal. You taught sailors to fear the unexpected, to laugh in the dark, to throw shoes at shadows. You made them superstitious and suspicious, but also connected. After all, nothing bonds a crew quite like blaming their problems on something with a tail. You left a mark on trade and travel, too. Rats aboard merchant vessels forced the world to take disease seriously. Quarantine stations, port inspections, entire city policies born from the terror of a single rat slipping ashore. You played a small part in global health history, even if you never got a medal, or, more likely, even if you would have chewed right through it. And let's not forget your role as a silent witness. While captains logged battles and sailors wrote home about storms, you observed it all from the beams and barrels, collecting secrets. Your life was one of perpetual eavesdropping, seeing everything, saying nothing, existing in the footnotes and the margins. If rats could write, what tales you'd tell, of love and loss, of bread stolen and boots nibbled, of men who survived the impossible and those who simply didn't. Yet, as time sails on, even rats fade into myth. Today, the age of sail lives, mostly in stories, in museums, and in bedtime documentaries whispered to insomniacs and night owls. Most people will never know what it felt like to breathe that thick, rank air, to hide from the cat, to survive a hurricane by sheer luck and soft bones. But a part of you lingers every time someone tells a ghost story about ships, or hears a scratching in the wall and wonders, what if? Let's pause and breathe. The world above is quiet now. The ship's bones are dry, the bunks empty, the biscuits dust. You've earned this calm. All your struggles, victories, losses, but not erased. They live on in the way we remember the dark corners, the tales we tell of unseen survivors, the caution we take at every port. There's something quietly heroic about it, isn't there? No grand monuments, no heroic last stands, just the stubborn, miraculous persistence of life. You were never meant to be a legend, and yet, by refusing to die quietly, you became one. Every rat that boards a ship today, every rule written to keep them out, every sailor's curse echoing through the years, is a testament to the power of existing where you're not wanted and enduring anyway. In the end, it's not about being remembered, it's about endurance, about how the tiniest lives overlooked, maligned, underestimated shape the world in ways no one expects. As ships shrink and ports grow, as cities rise and plagues recede, the humble shiprat stands as a symbol of adaptation, survival, and the wild persistence of nature in the face of human ambition. So, as you drift into that last deep sleep, let the world carry on. Let it forget, or half remember, or invent new stories about creatures in the dark. You've done enough. You've gnawed your path through the world's history, left tooth marks on the hulls of empires, and taught 1,000 sailors humility. If that's not a legacy, what is? Sleep tight, little survivor. You've earned your rest. The sea is calm, the ship is still, and the story is yours, forever floating on the edge of memory. If you made it this far, congratulations. You just lived an entire rodent life across centuries of ocean misery. If you're still awake, you deserve a medal. If you're asleep, well, that's the point. Either way, don't forget to subscribe. For more disturbing bedtime stories, we're always here.